I had a Talmud teacher, Rabbi Ed Gershfield, and when I had my first position in Long Island, I called him up and I said, Rabbi Gershfield, I'm having trouble soliciting people for all these different causes. And it seems like every time I turn around, there's another dinner, there's another event, and I have to ask, people. And he says, you shouldn't worry about it. Because Jews are used to giving. Because it's in the Torah. And from the time that you're born, as a Jew, you just are inculcated with this message that you're supposed to give. That tzedakah is just part of your life. So, they don't want to give, they won't give. And you shouldn't, just keep asking. So, certainly it is, directly from the Torah. And tonight, I just passed out this one sheet that has some basic things about tzedakah in it and definition. And it's in the narrative of the Torah itself, very early on, in the story of Yaakov Avinu, of Jacob, he makes a covenant with God. And part of the covenant is that he says, God, if you take care of me, then you'll be my God, and I'm going to give 1/10 of everything I have to you. So that's the first instance of tithing, is with Jacob. And it's repeated and developed throughout the Torah. But this idea of tithing that Jacob had was one that recognizes that all material things belong to Hashem. That we get all those things from God, and that each one of them is a gift. And that there's so much of that stuff around in the world, and we shouldn't feel like it's just ours alone. It's ours all to make use of, and when we're gone, we're going to have to leave all that stuff here. So that's the basic premise of the Torah, is to separate the material in that way, and that's the whole purpose of blessings and giving blessings. In fact, when we say the Hamotzi, when you sit down to eat, you're actually asking God for permission to eat His food. And if you don't do that, the rabbis say it's like you're stealing food, because you haven't said the blessing beforehand. And it's in order to bring that to consciousness. And now, we don't rely, as Jewish people, on doing just the right thing, because we don't have that much confidence in ourselves. So instead, we have these laws that come from the Torah. So if you look on your sheet just for a second up there, where at the very top, there's a definition of the word charity, derived from the Latin root, which means to love, and natural affection, benevolence, kindness. And the word tzedakah is not that at all. It's derived from the word that means to be just, in a legal sense, to be right or just. And that's what to be tzaddik. A tzaddik is a righteous person. And in the Torah specifically, it has to do with judicial matters. And the Jewish people use this term, tzedakah, most commonly to refer to the action of giving money or some kind of sustenance, as it says here, to the poor. But that's the way we understand it nowadays, and through Rabbinic Judaism, as it's performing acts so that others can be sustained. And it's not just because that tzedakah and giving is a nice thing to do. Because if you didn't feel like being nice that day, or that month or that year, then tzedakah would never happen. So we are commanded to do acts of tzedakah because that ensures that society itself is going to be a just and a righteous place for people to live. And so that's the whole basis of tzedakah and the commandment for it. I should say, when you were calling up people on the phone, you can remember, this is a mitzvah, and we're all commanded to do that. You can fulfill it if you want, or otherwise. These two rabbinic teachings on the page here actually appear in the Siddur. And every morning when you start your morning prayers, you recite these two excerpts. The first one from the Mishnah Peah, and it says, in order to set yourself in the right mind for the day, about things like tzedakah and gimilut chasadim, which we're not really talking about tonight. Elu Devrim She'en Lehem Shira. These are the things that don't have any measure. Heya v'hadikurim harayon gimilu chafizim v'tamut Torah. That is, when it comes to things like bringing the first fruits to the temple, or peah, which is one of those early forms of tzedakah, leaving the corners of the field, or leket, that there's no measure for that. That means you can give, as big as your field is, you have to leave that corner. You can leave a little bigger corner, a little smaller corner, but you still have to leave that corner there. The next one is from the Talmud, from Shabbat. Elu Dvarim she'adam ochel pirotem b'olam hazeh ve'keren kimon leva. That is, there are certain things that a person receives benefit in this world, and the major portion, we don't really have a material reward for that, like giving tzedakah or doing things like acts of loving kindness. And some of them are kibod avim, honoring your parents, giving chasadim, acts of loving kindness. But also things like hachnasat orchim, inviting people into your home, going and visiting the sick, and hachnasat kala, which is a form of tzedakah, of giving, making sure that somebody who is a bride is able to have a wedding and a dress and the whole thing. If her family can't afford it, it's actually the responsibility of the community to make sure that she has a proper wedding. And the same thing goes for burial as well, that it's up to the community to bury the person in the proper way if the family can't afford to do that as well. Chevra Kadisha is based on that very principle. So these are just some examples of tzedakah, about how they're ingrained in us for generations, and it's part of our collective unconscious, as well as something that we try to bring into our daily conscious through things like study and prayer as well. Chazak Yamas, may all be strengthened to do justice.